In the last class, we started our discussion on chapter 2 and we talked about few things. Basically, what is the scientific method underlying this subject? How do we frame economic theories in this subject? What is the method which guides the theories that are framed? Then we talked about the role of assumptions and how is it different from physical sciences or pure sciences. We also talked about how there is a problem of conducting experiments. When we are talking about economic theories, it is difficult to form experiments, and hence economists or academicians who are working on theories, who are working on economic theories, are always looking for natural experiments, natural events which could be converted into experiments to test certain economic theories. We then talked about the circular flow, where we talked about how different sectors interact with each other. How is there a flow of income across these sectors? And we saw that everything that is planted into the system, everything that is injected into the system is withdrawn from the system from one or the other sector. We'll be talking about the second example of an economic model, which is production possibilities frontier. Now, production possibility frontier is basically a graph that shows you the combinations of different output that an economy can produce given different available factors of production and the available production technology. So basically, this production possibility frontier is a kind of a graph which tells you ki what are the possible levels of output that an economy can produce, provided the economy has given set of inputs and a given set of production technology. To simplify this model, as we already have discussed that we use assumptions to simplify economic models, we are going to again keep some assumptions here. We are assuming that we are in an economy which is producing two goods, cars and computers. So this is the assumption that we are dealing with here. Now, to plot this graph, let's say on the x-axis you have one commodity, cars, and on the y-axis you have another commodity, computers, and we are assuming that the economy is only producing these two commodities. Then the production possibility frontier would look like this. This is the graph for production possibility frontier, and obviously you can have several points here. Let me denote some points, and let's now try to understand each of these points. So you see that there are two points here, A and B, which are lying on the boundary of this graph. Firstly, what is this graph depicting? Since this is a production possibility frontier, in short we also call it as a PPF, it means that at point A you are producing a certain level of cars and a certain level of computers. So let me just give some hypothetical numbers. So what is the point depicting? The point is saying that at point A, you are able to produce 600 cars and 2200 computers. This is one possible production point for this economy. Point B is another possible production point where the economy is producing 700 cars and 1500 computers. Now, point A and point B are 2 points which are telling you the possible output combination of the commodities produced by this economy given the amount of inputs that the economy has, given the amount of technology that the economy has. Now, there are several points on this boundary of the curve which are definitely production possible points. Then you also have some points which lie in the graph, which lie to the left of this boundary. So points like these points specifically are points which are called as inefficient points. The reason being that you are not using your inputs completely. You are not putting your inputs to the best possible usage, and at all of these points you are producing less than the points on the boundary. बेसिकली जितना प्रोडक्शन आप बाउंड्री पॉइंट्स पे कर रहे हो, आप डेफिनेटली उससे कम प्रोडक्शन करोगे इन पॉइंट्स पे. सो देयर इज सम अमाउंट ऑफ इनएफिशिएंसी इन्वॉल्व्ड in these points, and that's why these are called as inefficient points. There is a possibility that the economy is at one of these points. You know that there is always a problem of unemployment, under usage of resources in a lot of economies, including ours too, including the Indian economy. If there is an issue of underutilization of resources, or we do not have enough skills to use the kind of resources that are available to us, or there are other kind of issues, other kind of inefficiencies in the market which are not allowing us to use the resources to their optimal point, then it is possible that the economy lands up at these points because the economy is not using their resources properly. So obviously these points are also included in the production possibility frontier because these are also equally possible production points. Although as an ideal situation, you would want to be at the boundary points because that is the point which is using your resources to the best possible case, but it is also possible that you are at one of these points. Then you have another set of points which are lying to the right of this boundary. These are points which are non-feasible points. And why are we calling them as non-feasible points? Is simply because we cannot attain these points. Given the amount of inputs we have, given the amount of technology we have, it is impossible for this economy, जिसके लिए हमने graph plot करा है, to attain these points. So basically the boundary, the production possibility boundary tells you the maximum possible output that could be produced given your resources. All the points which are lying to the right of this boundary will be non-feasible points. Now that is about the points to the right, to the left, and on the boundary. Another interesting point that you can note from this graph comes from your learning of the principles that we have covered in the first chapter, which talked about, the very first principle talked about trade-offs. It talked about that people face trade-offs, economies also face trade-offs. Just how individuals face trade-offs, economies also face trade-offs. One visible trade-off that you can see here is that when the economy is at point A, the economy is able to produce 600 cars but 2200 computers. If the economy tries to produce more of cars, अगर इस point से economy किसी ऐसे point पे पहुंचती है जहां पे the economy wants to produce more cars, then it will have to face a trade-off in terms of computers. This is also called as the opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost is a number which tells you exactly the amount of trade-off you are facing. A trade-off is a concept, and opportunity cost tells you the measure of it. It tells you the intensity, the amount. By how much are you facing the trade-off? In this particular case, the opportunity cost is, so you are producing 100 extra cars between point A and point B, but you are losing 700 computers. So you can say, in other words, that the opportunity cost of 100 cars is equivalent to 700 computers. So basically, to produce one extra car, you have to let go, you have to forego 7 computers. And that is exactly the opportunity cost here. What you notice here in the production possibility frontier is that to produce more of one thing, you will have to produce less of another thing, which is in sync with the principle that we read in the first chapter. Another interesting thing that you notice here is that the opportunity cost at each point of the production possibility frontier is different. So opportunity cost is not fixed. ऐसा नहीं है कि if I'm saying कि opportunity cost of one car is equal to 7 computers, because 100 cars का opportunity cost है 700 computers. To produce 100 extra cars, you have to lose 700 computers, which effectively means कि एक car को produce करने के लिए you will have to lose 7 computers. But this is not fixed. We cannot say that at each point the opportunity cost will be the same. Opportunity cost is changing. It is not fixed. You notice that the curve of this graph, it is a curved graph. It is bowed outwards. Opportunity cost is also the slope of this graph. I can indicate the slope at a particular point by drawing a tangent passing through that point, and I can draw a tangent at these points, and the slope of these tangents will basically be the slope of the curve at these points. You notice that the slope at each of these points is different, and since the opportunity cost is nothing but the slope of the production possibility frontier, we can say that even the opportunity cost is different. As you increase the production of cars, the opportunity cost of cars is increasing. You notice that here the slope of the curve is flatter. Here it is steeper. So you notice that the slope of the curve is actually increasing as you increase the number of cars, and you can also check this by plotting some points here. So when you increase the production of car by say 1 unit at this point, and similarly if you're increasing the production of car at this point, you notice that the amount of computers that you have to lose is actually increasing. So you are increasing the amount of cars by 1 unit here at this point, and you're doing the same thing at this point, but you notice that the amount of computers that you are losing for the first increase in car is this much, is given by this difference, and for the second change in the production of cars, the loss in computers is this much, which tells you that the opportunity cost is not fixed and it is in fact changing at each point of the production possibility frontier. The third important point here to be understood is that it is possible to change the level of the production possibility frontier. Suppose there is some kind of technological advancement that has occurred in your economy. Suddenly your economy has a lot of technology available, because of which you are now able to produce more of both cars and computers. In that particular situation, your production possibility frontier will shift outwards. And when it shifts outwards, you notice that suppose your economy was initially at this point, now your economy can be at a point B where you are producing more of both cars and computers. And that has happened because of some external change, something that has changed the production capacity of your economy. Now your economy is capable of producing more of both commodities, both cars and computers. So it is possible for the economy to attain these points, provided there is an expansion in the production capacity of the economy. Agar if there is some kind of external change that occurs in the economy which expands the production capability of the economy, then it is possible for you to attain these points as well. And that will lead to a shift in the production possibility frontier. So this is a second kind of model. Again, we are not getting into the depth of it. We just want to understand the broad outline of the model, because we are discussing about how economic models are framed, what are the underlying methods that we use to get to these models. And that's why, just for an example's sake, we have looked at two models. First, the circular flow diagram, and the second one is this production possibility frontier. Now, next important thing when you talk about economics is to understand how economists work as policy advisors. Now, economics एक ऐसा subject है which is very, very practical. Practical in the sense that you sort of apply what you read to your real life. What you're reading in this subject is something that is happening around yourself on a very regular basis, on a daily basis. You can witness things happening around yourself, and that's exactly what you are trying to understand in this subject. Now, since economy plays a huge role in guiding the development of any nation, we are discussing about how we can attain more and more growth in the economy, how we can reduce unemployment in the economy, and these are all economic questions. The answers to all of these questions lies in the principles of economics, lies in the theory that you are dealing in this subject. But what exactly is the relationship between economists and policy advisors? Now, these are two different kinds of roles which are not exactly similar to each other. जब हम बात करते हैं पॉलिसीज की, जो हम पॉलिसीज बिल्ड करते हैं इकोनॉमी में, these are policies which come into place after taking into account a lot of factors. And when you talk about economics, or when you talk about people who are solely interested in economics, they only look at a certain issue from the perspective of economics. ठीक है, तो ऐसा हो सकता है कि जब आप कोई पॉलिसी फ्रेम कर रहे हो, suppose any government introduces a policy, it will obviously seek economics guidance, but it will also seek other kinds of guidance, like how will it be implemented, how will it affect the inequality in the economy, what is the politics behind it, how will it affect the political angle if they implement this policy, how will it affect the social divisions. So suppose the economy has multiple religions, multiple castes, how will this policy affect that? So whenever any policy maker creates a policy, it is not only dependent on economics, and that has to be understood, that policies are not always purely economics. They are not purely based on the principles of economics. Sometimes some policies are introduced by the government which may not make sense from the perspective of economics as a subject, but might make sense from the perspective of other subjects. So we need to understand that difference between economics, specifically economists, people who are only looking at an issue from only economics perspective, and policy advisors who are looking at an issue from different perspectives besides economics. And that difference could be understood by understanding the difference between positive and normative analysis. Let's say, let me write two statements here. First is minimum wage laws cause unemployment. Second, the government should raise minimum wage. Notice here a slight difference in the two statements, which is first statement says that minimum wage laws cause unemployment. कि जो minimum wage laws होते हैं, you would know that you have minimum wage laws in your country, you have minimum wage laws in a lot of countries where the government says इतने level of wages से नीचे कोई भी employer अपने employee को wage नहीं देगा. So they put a kind of a floor, I mean they put a minimum level कि इसके नीचे आप अपने wages नहीं रख सकते हो economy में. So say that level is 500 rupees a day. I'm just saying a hypothetical number. So if the government announces कि 500 rupees पर डे से नीचे कोई भी एम्प्लॉयर जो एक ऑर्गेनाइज्ड सेटअप में है वो अपने एम्प्लॉय को 500 पर डे से नीचे वेज नहीं देगा. दैट इज कॉल्ड एज अ मिनिमम वेज लॉ. Now, first statement is in fact saying that this wage law will create more unemployment. And why will it create more unemployment is actually something you will read in the later chapters. You will read this particular issue as a case study. That minimum wage laws, from a social perspective, they sound nice. That yes, this avoids exploitation of employees because it is possible that for some situations the employer might give us lower wages, lower salaries. Now, because of minimum wage laws, we are going to get at least this much amount of salary per month or per day. Economists actually believe that this policy will create unemployment. Rather than helping the community of employees to make sure that they are getting minimum amount of wages, it will in fact disturb the labor market and will create more unemployment. People will now lose more jobs, people will be unemployed, which is a cause of concern obviously for the economy. So ideally, if you look at this situation from this perspective, then the government shouldn't introduce this kind of policy. Why is the government introducing such policies which is actually creating more unemployment? And that is exactly the difference you need to understand, that as policy advisors, the government may not just look at one particular issue. The government might also want to look at the social aspect or maybe the political aspect. The policy advisor is in fact saying that the government should raise minimum wages. मतलब अगर 500 per day है तो it should be 700 per day. That is what the policy advisor is suggesting. And according to economists, it would create unemployment. So ideally, the government shouldn't do this. But why is the government doing this? Is because the government does not always look at economics. It also looks at other aspects. The government might feel, if it has to think from a political perspective, that the majority population, the vote bank or the people who are going to vote us back into the system are the people who are employed. And we need to make them happy. And we can make them happy by offering them higher wages. So that could be a political perspective that the government is thinking from and introducing this policy. The government could think from a social perspective that we do not want any kind of exploitation of workers. We do not want people to be putting their hard work and not earning enough money in return for the hard work. So we are setting a bar, we are setting a minimum level of income that the employers need to make sure that they are giving to their employees. So there could be different aspects of why the government is introducing this policy. And that is exactly the difference between positive and normative analysis. Positive analysis tells you, it is a descriptive statement. It tells you factual things. It tells you what is really happening. So positive statement would be that minimum wage laws will create unemployment. It is a fact. It is a fact backed by economic theory. एक economic theory है जो इस fact को prove करती है. Normative analysis is more on the grounds of opinions or value. These are not right or wrong statements. Positive statements could be either right or wrong. When you are saying minimum wage laws create unemployment, it is correct because it is factually proven. Normative analysis is not correct or wrong. It is more like an opinion. Maybe I have a different opinion, someone else has a different opinion on the same issue. Maybe I feel that the government should raise minimum wages, the next person sitting to me can disagree and say that the government shouldn't raise minimum wages. So normative analysis is when you have an opinion to a certain thing, when you have a value, and these are suggestions. Positive statements or positive analysis is descriptive, and that is the difference between an economist. Economists would always look at the positive sort of analysis, and policy advisors usually look at normative sort of analysis. Now when we say that normative is opinion based, it will definitely also include factual things, but besides the factual things, it will have an opinion complementary to the facts. It will have some opinion or value. So positive statements describe the world, they describe the situation, they describe the behavior, whereas normative prescribes how the world should be. So that is exactly the difference. Describes is positive, something that is describing, and prescribes, meaning what you are suggesting, is normative. Now, as I just said, that there can be disagreements. When we talk about normative analysis, as I said, that normative analysis is subjective. It could differ from person to person, and that creates disagreements amongst economists. Economics as a subject is not made up of people who are on the same level. No, economics has different schools of thought, has different ideas, has different theories, which are supported by some people and not supported by some people, which is that there are disagreements in this subject, that economists, people who are well read, who have studied economics in depth, who have researched on economic principles, economic issues in depth, they have disagreements amongst each other. And the disagreements are mainly because of differences in values or differences in opinions. That is primarily the difference between the positive and the normative side of economics.